Statement on Ukraine, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I'll make a statement on the latest situation in Ukraine, on the recent strikes against Kyiv, on our continuing support for Ukraine and our response to continuing Russian aggression, and on a major new package of sanctions against Russian oil and gas that I am announcing today. And it's a pleasure to be able to do so on a day in which we have welcomed Ruslan Stefanchuk, the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, here to the House of Commons, a sign of our strong and continued friendship. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's also a reflection of the importance of Ukraine's security to this government and to all of us here in the UK that Ukraine is my first statement to the House from the dispatch box as Foreign Secretary, just as Ukraine was my first visit when taking up this role a month ago. And before I start, let me also say thank you and pay tribute to my predecessor in this role, the now Deputy Prime Minister and member for Tottenham, for his work to represent our country on the world stage with great principle and distinction, and who showed such strong and continued leadership in supporting Ukraine. 3.5 years after Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, President Putin has failed in his war aims. He is failing on his military objectives, on the economy, and on his political objectives for both Ukraine and Europe, thanks to the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people and the support and determination of Ukraine's friends. As Ukraine stands firm against Russia, the UK stands firm with Ukraine. Ukraine's security is Europe's security, and the security and stability of the whole of Europe is vital for our security here in the UK. President Zelensky stands ready to hold talks for peace, but President Putin seeks only to escalate war. He will not succeed, because now is the time not just to continue with our steadfast support for Ukraine's defence, but to substantially increase the pressure on Russia's economy and on Putin's war machine. Major new UK sanctions against Russia's biggest oil companies and shadow fleet, new concerted actions with our partners to choke off oil and gas revenues and to hit at the heart of the Putin's economy and war machine, because we are determined to support our Ukrainian friends and to stand up for our own security now. Madam Deputy Speaker, what was clear to me in Kyiv a few weeks ago, and I think it's clear to everyone visiting Ukraine, is the enduring courage and unbreakable spirit of the Ukrainian people. And I saw firsthand the damage from an Iskander missile on Ukraine's Cabinet of Ministers building just 10 days after the British Council offices were also damaged. I met families whose lives had been uprooted, their homes destroyed, and their children's education torn apart. And I met up with 2 teenagers who lived with us in Castleford during the first year of the war and have now returned, and who, despite the drones and the bombardments and the disruption to their lives and their schooling, are continuing to train as international standard ballroom dancers. Because, like Ukrainians across their country, they will not let Russia destroy their dreams. And that is what Vladimir Putin will never understand about the Ukrainian people. For 3.5 years, indeed since 2014, he has questioned their resilience. For 3.5 years, he has doubted the commitment of their allies, and for 3.5 years, he has been proven wrong. And everywhere I went in Kyiv last month, I saw a nation resolute in its fight. So that despite the huge Russian mobilisation efforts in the last 3 years, Putin remains as far away from achieving those military goals as he has ever been. In this war that Putin started, Russian losses are now 20 times higher than Soviet losses in Afghanistan. In this war that Putin is continuing to pursue, Russia is now struggling to equip its forces, and in some areas, stocks are so low they have resorted to using military kit from the 1950s. And as a result of this war that Putin refuses to end, the IMF have revised down Russian growth forecasts, and military spending is now outstripping social spending for the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union. We know that with increased desperation, however, comes increased danger. And in recent weeks, Putin has engaged in provocative and reckless violations of NATO airspace in Estonia, Poland and Romania, against which NATO stands together, resolute and ready to act. His recent bombardment of Ukraine has seen some of the largest attacks in Europe since the height of the Second World War, with civilian casualties rising nearly 40%, with children killed in playgrounds, hospitals and schools destroyed, and civilian energy infrastructure targeted. Just yesterday, a UN aid convoy was hit, delivering vital assistance to a frontline community. So while we continue to strive for peace for Ukraine, we must be steeled for the war to continue. And that means focusing on 4 priorities. First, ensuring that Ukraine gets the support it needs to stand up to this latest onslaught. In my meetings with President Zelensky and Foreign Minister Sybiha in September, I reaffirmed the UK's ironclad support. We are providing £4.5 billion of military support for Ukraine this year, more than ever before, with over £150 million worth of air defence and artillery delivered in the last 2 months alone. We've used our co-chairmanship of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group to galvanise partners, raising over £2 billion through the UK-run International Fund for Ukraine to support the most urgent military needs. And during that key visit, I announced £142 million in UK aid to support Ukraine through the winter and into next year, including our largest emergency energy support package since the start of the war to restore and repair water, heating and electricity systems. Second, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will ramp up the pressure on Russia to ensure that their escalation comes at a clear cost. So I am today setting out a further new set of sanctions, among our strongest so far, to tighten the pressure on Russia's economy. This will be the second set of sanctions I have announced in a month, and I'm ready to go further still. It will take the total UK-imposed sanctions on Russia-related individuals and entities to over 2,900. At the UN Security Council last month, I told Foreign Minister Lavrov directly, shortly before he walked out of the chamber, that we will target your ailing economy, your oil and gas revenues, and the defence industry making your munitions, because we know for Russia the cost of war is piling up. With immediate effect, we are sanctioning Russia's 2 largest oil producers, Rosneft and Lukoil, the 2 biggest Russian energy firms ever targeted by UK sanctions. Part of an extensive new sanctions package of 90 targets, including refineries around the world that are responsible for importing Russian oil, suppliers of drone and missile components, and 44 shadow fleet vessels, further disrupting the network of tankers that transport Russia's oil. The UK has now sanctioned more shadow fleet vessels than any other partner, taking billions of dollars of Russian oil off the market. And we're sanctioning not just Russian individuals and companies, but also organisations in third countries who continue to support the Russian war effort, with all those damaging consequences, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe's stability too. And these sanctions stop UK businesses and individuals from trading or transacting with the actors that we have targeted. And importantly, we're also strengthening our coordination with the EU, who are finalising a new wave of sanctions, and we are urging countries across the world to go further, working with us in targeting Russian oil and gas. President Zelensky has made clear in recent months he supports a full unconditional ceasefire and is ready to meet with Putin for talks to achieve a just and lasting peace. President Trump has urged peace and ceasefire talks, but instead President Putin is seeking only to escalate the conflict, and that is why this economic and coordinated economic pressure is so urgent and important to get him to change course. Third, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will ensure that Ukraine gets the financial support it needs to recover and that Russia is the one to pay. The whole House will be aware of the acute financing needs facing Ukraine, both now and in the long term. So we are pushing at every level to ensure that frozen Russian assets can be used to meet these needs. They were on the agenda of the G7 finance ministers when they met on the 1st of October. And today, the Chancellor is in Washington, again pressing for progress with her counterparts, as I have done directly with our European partners. And we will continue to argue that the full value of Russian sovereign assets must be used to support Ukraine. The EU has developed a proposal for reparations loans for Ukraine, which we welcome, and this has been discussed between the Prime Minister, Chancellor Merz and President Macron. We expect and hope further progress will be made in the coming weeks. But finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, while we're prepared for this war to continue, we must also keep working and preparing for peace. We've seen in recent days what's possible when the international community builds a consensus for peace, and we know too the huge international coordination that has come behind the US peace initiative in the Middle East, and the huge international effort that will be needed to ensure it is implemented. But those same principles on international coordination and effort over time are important for Ukraine. That's why, together with France, the UK government has convened over 30 countries in several meetings of the Coalition of the Willing, encouraging contributions towards a multinational force which would stand ready to deploy to Ukraine upon a ceasefire or peace agreement to help regenerate Ukraine's armed forces so that Russia is never able to attack again. And we're also implementing the 100-year partnership signed by the Prime Minister and President Zelensky in January, making real our commitment to stand with Ukraine not just today or tomorrow, but over many decades to come. Madam Deputy Speaker, while Ukraine continues to show its endless reserves of strength, Vladimir Putin continues to show his endless depths of depravity. Time and again, he's shown his willingness to threaten the security and sovereignty of other nations, to threaten democracy and undermine the world order, to kidnap tens of thousands of children. From cyber attacks in Moldova to the deployment of mercenaries in the Sahel, Russia's actions seek to topple governments, fuel conflict and spread instability far beyond Europe's borders. That is why the UK continues to support Ukraine, not just to help brave people defend themselves, but to make clear that aggression does not pay, Putin does not win, that force will be resisted with strength, and that criminals will be held accountable. Madam Deputy Speaker, Ukraine's security is our security, and I commend this statement to the House.
As the Foreign Secretary, with prior agreement with the Chair, was allowed to speak a little while longer than the allocated time, the same will be allowed to the front benches on the opposite side as well. I now call the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel.
Speaker, I'm grateful to the Foreign Secretary for advance sight of her statement, and I also would like to welcome her to her place in her new role. We meet again at the dispatch box in the many roles of where we've been shadowing each other, and this time around it feels like she is indeed following me in this portfolio. Madam Deputy Speaker, on the occasion of the visit of the chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament to our Parliament, it is right that Britain stands with Ukraine on what will soon be the eve of the fourth winter of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Putin's relentless efforts to obtain by barbaric levels of force the territory of a sovereign European state has undermined peace in Europe and the established international order. In recent months, we have seen European and NATO airspace brazenly and deliberately violated by Russian fighter jets. From Poland to Estonia to Romania, such aggressive provocation must yield stronger deterrence against Russia. The same applies to the intensified aerial bombardment of Kyiv. The hundreds upon hundreds of Iranian Shahed drones attacking civilians is a cruel attempt by Putin to psychologically torture Ukrainians. But the bombing will not break their resolve. From Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children to the daily bombardment of propaganda and bombs, Britain must stand firm to level the playing field for Ukraine so that it can repel those attacks. Britain must continue to be at the forefront of continually refuelling our country's ability to support Ukraine, never standing still. So can the Foreign Secretary say, if she is brokering more packages here at home or across NATO to support Ukraine's air defence, the 100-year partnership agreement with Ukraine must be leveraged to support innovation in defence technology and production within Ukraine right now, while we also learn from Ukraine's successes in these fields. The way the Ukrainian people have conducted themselves and have continued to fight for what is rightfully theirs in the face of the barbarity and savagery that many of us thought was confined to the bygone era will go down in the records of history. We must ensure Russia's defeat goes down in history too. To do so, Britain must lead all allies to raise the price for Russia for its aggression by cutting off Russia's financial lifelines, which continue to fund Putin's war in Ukraine and fight against our democratic values. So I welcome the Foreign Secretary's announcements today of the new entities, including the ships that have been sanctioned as of today. She will, of course, know that China, India and Turkey have become the mainstay of Russian oil exports, together purchasing around $380 billion of Russian crude. This does provide Putin with a lifeline to fund this illegal war and invasion at the cost of around $1 billion per day. So in addition to the new sanctions announced today, can the Foreign Secretary confirm whether she or the Prime Minister has had any discussions with India, Turkey and China about the refineries in questions in their own countries purchasing Russian oil and then re-exporting them? And is the UK in a position to spearhead this direct challenge and get this stopped? Will the Foreign Secretary challenge European countries who are still importing Russian liquefied national gas to phase this out far more rapidly? And I do recognise and appreciate her comments that she's made about EU countries and the sanction package. Further to the new banking sanctions announced, will she commit to review what we can do to limit Russia's banking sector, including their regional banks? On the mobilisation of frozen assets, we do need to go beyond just offering Ukraine loans from the revenues of the sanctioned assets and find a new formula under the law that mobilises the assets now to fund Ukraine's defeat of Russia in the immediate term. London is, of course, home to our world-class capital markets, and the City of London must be deployed to help find solutions to this, which our diplomats can then sell to our allies, because this needs concerted action. So can the Foreign Secretary confirm whether the Coalition of the Willing, convened in February this year, is as determined as it was then to not just stand with Ukraine, but work to find solutions to these major issues that we all see? The UK must be committed to 3% on defence by the end of the decade, and this is a vital step on our route to higher sustained spending demanded by the new NATO targets. So may I ask, in her new role as Foreign Secretary, is she in discussions with the Chancellor about this? Because Britain must be ready for the continuous tensions with Russia, with the very effective deterrents, including against sub-conventional threats such as hybrid warfare, sabotage of infrastructure, disinformation, election interference and killings. If we do not put up boundaries now, Russia will come closer. But Russia is stoppable. We've seen positive developments in recent weeks, including in the decisive election result in Moldova, that should cement its Euro-Atlantic trajectory. But Russia's behaviour elsewhere, from Georgia to the Balkans, to the stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus, is deeply alarming. And here at home, there are reports that the cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover may have emanated from Russia. Is the Foreign Secretary able to confirm the attribution of this to the House? The whole Euro-Atlantic alliance needs to be incredibly robust, because the lessons of the last 20 years are crystal clear, and the outcome of the war in Ukraine will shape the future of European global security. President Trump's recent remarks were absolutely right. Our Ukrainian friends can regain the territory that is rightfully theirs, and we support them on that. Britain and our European allies must now pull out all the stops to help our Ukrainian friends expedite Putin's exit from their country. And we should be clear that territorial concessions must never happen, as this would be a reward for Putin's barbarism. Britain should lead the way and can lead the way in weakening Putin's war machine with a full range of hard-hitting new sanctions and brokering new military packages of aid with our allies to ensure that Ukraine has the capabilities it needs to defeat Putin's tyranny.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the Shadow Foreign Secretary's response, and very glad to be facing her back across the dispatch boxes again. I think she and I probably missed each other, and this is perhaps a very new experience for both of us to be standing opposite each other at the dispatch boxes and actually agreeing on some things compared to the last time round. I did actually check, it was the last time that she and I were opposite each other in the standing opposite each other on other sides of the dispatch box, and I think it was the 5th of September. And it was the day, in fact, that Liz Truss was confirmed as Prime Minister. Perhaps not quite such a good day for the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who at that time, as Home Secretary, then lost her place on the front bench, but also not such a good time for the country either, as well. But it was, interestingly, that day, after we had our exchanges that day, the next discussion that day was a discussion on Ukraine. And that was 2022. And my right honourable friend, the current Defence Secretary, speaking the benches opposite that day, began his remarks by observing that it was day 194 of a war that Vladimir Putin had expected to be over inside a week. And he saluted the bravery of the Ukrainian resistance and pledged the Labour Party's full backing for every aspect of what her government was then doing at the time. So now here we are, not on day 194, but day 1,330. And still all of us in this House full of admiration and respect for the Ukrainian resistance, still all of us determined to support Ukraine in the face of the continuing Russian onslaught. So I welcome the Shadow Foreign Secretary's continuation of that cross-party support for the Ukrainian people and for the actions that we need to continue to take to support Ukraine, both in its defence and also in the pressure that we need. So I can assure her that we will continue to support Ukraine's defences and continue to look at what more we can do. And the Defence Secretary has also set out new partnerships, particularly working with Ukraine on developing new drone technology, both learning from their technological experiences and also helping them with production as well. She also raised the issues about third countries, including countries including China and India and Turkey, and also other European countries that have continued to be involved in purchasing things from Russia. What I can tell her is that we want as wide as possible a consensus on economic pressure on Russia over Ukraine, and I am continuing to raise this with very many different countries, including some of those that she's referred to, and also we are also including as part of our sanctions packages, sanctions against entities operating in third countries now as well, because we need to continue to do so. We also need to be clear that the ability to target the Russian sovereign assets needs to be about mobilising the assets themselves and going further and ensuring that there is an effective way to do so. We do believe that there is an effective way to do so, and that we have been working with the EU to do so, and will continue to put considerable pressure on as many countries as possible to join us in taking action around Russian sovereign assets. I think all of us in this House are clear, I hope, or at least the majority of the parties in this House are clear, with some unfortunate exception, but I think the majority of this House is clear that we will need to continue to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, not just now, not just tomorrow, but for the future to come. Thank you.
Select Committee Chair Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can I begin by welcoming the Foreign Secretary to her new post publicly, and to echo the comments that she made about the previous Foreign Secretary. Can I also welcome her commitment to finally using the Russian frozen assets? I hope that the situation will be resolved soon, because they are needed for the defence and reconstruction of Ukraine. I'm pleased to see that she's going to take further advantage of Britain's unique sanctions regime to extend against the Russian individuals and countries. But she knows, particularly given her previous experience, perhaps better than most, that a regime is only as good as its enforcement. And there are times when doors need to be kicked down. What worries me is that the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation told the Treasury Committee a year ago that they had only implemented one £15,000 fine against British businesses for engaging with a sanctioned individual. So in the time since, in the last year, could she please tell us how many British businesses have faced financial penalties for direct or indirect breaches of sanctions on Russia or the Russian state, and what has been the value of those fines?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the point that the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has raised, and also thank her for her considerable work and expertise and the work that her committee does in this area as well. Warwickshire will know that the Foreign Office sets out the framework for sanctions and then works with the Treasury as well around the enforcement. And following the publication of the cross-government review on enforcement in May of this year, the government is committing to take stronger action to make compliance easier, but also to deter non-compliance and to make sure that there is proper enforcement in place. I'm advised that in 2025, the Office of Financial Sanctions implementation so far has totalled penalties of over 900,000, including an HMRC 1.1 million compound settlement. And in April, the National Crime Agency has secured the first convictions for breaches of Russian financial sanctions, but I am happy to work with the Chancellor to ensure she has any further information that she wants on that topic.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson James McCleary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to the Minister for advance sight of her statement today. I'd start off by warmly welcoming the announcement of fresh sanctions aimed at cutting Putin's oil and gas profits. It is vital that we make use of all the tools at our disposal to undermine his war machine, and we know that the oil and gas revenues are primarily what is being used to fund it. So these measures are a further step in the right direction. But today I'd like to encourage the government to go even further. Analysis by the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, a think tank, shows that UK-owned or insured LNG carriers have facilitated the transport of £45 billion of Russian gas since the start of the full-scale invasion. That means that 76% of the total export value of Russian LNG was carried on UK-owned or insured vessels. It is unconscionable that the UK businesses are still contributing to Putin's coffers. So will the Minister commit today to banning the provision of maritime services for Russian gas, including transport and insurance, and engage directly with the maritime insurance sector, a large proportion of which is based here in the UK, to find practical ways to implement such a ban? On the frozen Russian assets, I was very pleased to hear the Minister's ambition to progress plans to use their full value to support Ukraine's war effort. It is a measure which the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for action on for some months now. The government needs to move at pace as Ukraine continues to face Putin's relentless assault. So can the Secretary of State confirm to me the timetable she is looking at for new funds becoming available from the frozen assets? Can she outline how they will be allocated? And if barriers to seizing these assets are put in place internationally, can she commit to the UK government acting unilaterally with regard to seizing the assets held here in the UK? It is now also over 3 years since Roman Abramovich sold Chelsea Football Club. In June, the then Foreign Secretary said that the government was ready and willing to take legal action to finally secure the £2.5 billion generated from the sale, earmarked for additional support for Ukraine. It appears, however, that in that regard, the government's bark so far has been worse than its bite, as we have heard no more about how the government intends to pursue those assets. So can the Minister update the House today on what concrete action the government has taken since June to secure them? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we all hope to see a just peace in Ukraine, at which point thoughts will switch to reconstruction. So can the Secretary of State commit to providing full UK backing, including funding, to the Council of Europe's Register of Damage for Ukraine? Thank you, Madam.
Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Liberal Democrat front bench spokesperson for his questions and also his continued support for Ukraine as well. What I can tell him is we are determined to tighten the restrictions much further on not simply on the oil and gas companies themselves, although this is the first time to sanction these major companies, but also the distribution networks and those who continue to profit. So on the 12th of September, I announced 100 new sanctions, which included 70 more ships in the shadow fleet. Today, I have announced in the second sanctions package that I have announced since being appointed a further sanctions on a further 44 shadow fleet ships as well, because we are clear that that shadow fleet is otherwise undermining the impact of the sanctions that we have set out. On the Russian sovereign assets, This is an issue in order to have a proper impact, both in terms of the impact on Russia, but also in terms of the market impact as well. It is right that we should be working alongside partners, but we do welcome, as a result of that, the statements from President von der Leyen and the G7 finance ministers. I can tell him that this is a huge priority for me and for the Chancellor, who is pursuing exactly these issues about the timetables and about what final steps we need to take around Russian sovereign assets in Washington today. I can also tell him that the issue around the proceeds from the sale of the Chelsea Football Club is a priority for me personally as well, ensuring that they can reach humanitarian causes in Ukraine following Russia's illegal full-scale invasion, and I am deeply frustrated that has not been possible so far, but we are fully prepared to pursue this matter through the courts if required, while the door for negotiations remain open. And again, this is a matter that I have discussed not just with the Chancellor but internationally as well.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you. I first want to thank the Speaker, the Speaker's Office and the Deputy Speakers for the gracious welcome they gave Ruslan Stepanchuk, the Speaker of the Rada, today, and also seeing the Foreign Secretary in Kyiv on her first foreign visit, which was a real fillip to the people of Ukraine. I'd like to thank her for the sanctions package today, but I'd like to ask further questions about the siege of Russian assets. I'm pleased that we're ready to progress the siege of Russian assets, announcing work with France and Germany. But I'd like to ask the Foreign Secretary whether we are working at pace with our allies to ensure the siege of Russian assets. Ukrainians know that the best chance they have of winning this war is to move from freezing to seizing of the assets. Right. And I also want to ask if the United Kingdom will be providing finance for the reparations loan that the EU is proposing.
Secretary.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for what I know has been his continued work for many years on Ukraine. It was certainly very good to see him at the event in Kyiv as well. What I can reassure him is that we think that the work that the EU has done on the provided drawing up a new mechanism to be able to effectively mobilise the assets that are being held. We think that mechanism that they have set out is a really important one. We support that work, and it is on that basis that we believe that we and the EU and other allies should be trying to seek to make as rapid progress now, because ultimately the rebuilding of Ukraine, the support for Ukraine, should be paid for by Russia.
Rishi Sunak.
I welcome the Foreign Secretary to her new role and commend her on a very strong statement. And I welcome the progress that's being made by the G7 finance ministers in DC on this issue of seizing the Russian state assets. It's an issue I first started working on 3 years ago, and I know that the current Chancellor has continued that work. Now, because of that, there is a body of very clear technical analysis that's been done in the Treasury that I think shows clearly at this point that, firstly, there is a sound legal basis for taking these assets and using them. Secondly, that there is now a practical way to use them, especially as the bonds have matured into cash. And thirdly, that by acting in concert with allies, any risk to financial stability can be absolutely minimised. So can I continue to urge the Foreign Secretary to show continued UK leadership on this issue, as I know she is, especially sharing that work with our European allies, because I know she will agree with me that this is an urgent issue that requires action.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome all the points the Right Honourable Member and former Prime Minister has said, and also pay tribute to the work that I know that he did, both as Chancellor and as Prime Minister, to support Ukraine and to support the defence of Ukraine, and particularly also this work around Russian sovereign assets and different ways to ensure that there remains market stability, that we have the proper financial safeguards in place, but that we can make sure that money can get to Ukraine as a result of all of this. I have spoken myself both to colleagues in Belgium and France over the last week alone. As you know, the Prime Minister has discussed this with French and German counterparts in the last week as well. We will continue to press on every avenue to make the progress that he's talking about.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome my right honourable friend to her place and welcome the statement that she's made. In September, the Yale University Humanitarian Research Lab revealed that the number of facilities Russia is using in its forced deportation of Ukrainian children has risen from 53 to 210. That report highlighted that 110 facilities were being used to re-educate children, and that at 39 of those facilities, military training was being provided to train Ukrainian children to throw the grenades and pilot the drones that are destroying their homes and killing their families. So could my right honourable friend outline what further steps are being taken to relocate, rescue and return those children to their families?
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome the point that my honourable friend has made? The forcible deportation, the kidnapping of almost 20,000 Ukrainian children by Russia is one of the most disturbing aspects of this war. I agree with her with the importance of supporting those families. We have been supporting organisations such as Bring Kids Back UA and Save Ukraine, who are supporting efforts to return Ukrainian children. And just 2 weeks ago, Baroness Harman attended the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children event at the UN General Assembly. We will continue to do all we can to support the return of those children.
Father of the House, Edward Lee.
50 years ago, I was working down the corridor here for Margaret Thatcher, and I make this point to give an opportunity to the Foreign Secretary to pay tribute on the centenary of her birth to the lady who won the Cold War with Ronald Reagan. And the other point I want to make is that why did we win the Cold War? We didn't fire a single bullet. It was all about economic pressure on the Soviet Union, of course, the precursor of Russia. So I really want to follow my right honourable friend, the former Prime Minister. I think the whole House is determined on this, is united on this issue of Russian assets. And I'm also serve on the Council of Europe, and everybody there is passing motions trying to propel this forward. So is she confident that we can actually make progress on this? Because the way to bring down this regime and to end this war is, as we did with the Soviet Union, to break them economically.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think all of us would recognise the challenging jobs for all Prime Ministers, no matter our parties. He will understand that for a coal mining constituency like mine, there were obviously very strong views against the right former Prime Minister that the Father of the House refers to, but I do also pay tribute to his long service in this place that he has also referred to. I think there is strong agreement really across this House. We have to get those assets mobilised. We have to get that investment and that support into Ukraine. And it is right that Russia should pay the price for reconstructing, rebuilding and also defending Ukraine.
Dame Neil Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, it was really great to see the Secretary of State out in Ukraine. I know it was very, very much appreciated by the Ukrainian colleagues. And I would obviously, my right honourable friend will be very, very well aware that foreign investment is absolutely vital to the economy and the reconstruction of Ukraine. So I was wondering what talks she has had with ministerial colleagues and others about schemes such as that suggested by the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, which proposes using frozen Russian assets and/or Western government guarantees administered by the World Bank to provide greater availability of risk insurance for British investors in Ukraine.
Well, and I welcome my honourable friend's points that we need to, she's right, we need to look at different innovative ways of providing the financial support, providing the commitment and investment that Ukraine will need. This is about, obviously there are immediate issues around the defence equipment and also the support, like the support for the energy infrastructure that we are providing, but there will also be issues around longer term investment, and we should look innovatively at different ways to be able to support that.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Deputy Speaker, I'm Chairman of the All Party Parliamentary Group on Magnitsky sanctions, and we've been encouraging the last government and the present government to be much more aggressive about their sanctions regime when you look at the numbers of people sanctioned, it doesn't compare to what the United States has done and many others. So number one, I think this whole business of the money from the Chelsea sale, it's long overdue that this was settled. And it just beggars belief that we haven't managed to get that one done. And the other bit here, and I agree with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, the ex-Prime Minister rather, some of us live in hope, but I simply say that the shadow fleets could easily be attacked by sanctioning British marine insurers who have insured these ships. Without that insurance, they will not put to sea because they will have no financial backing for it. Why we haven't done that up until now is a complete mystery to me. That surely is something we should get on with straight away because we can act on that immediately.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Member for his long-standing commitment on these issues, both around issues around sanctions, but also around Russia and Ukraine as well. What I tell him is the impact of the sanctions is that any company or any UK company or resident that transacts with, as well as trades with, those sanctioned bodies will therefore be covered by the sanctions as well. And we will continue to look at what further we can do to keep increasing the pressure on Russia. I can assure him on the Chelsea Football Club proceeds, I strongly agree that this needs to move as swiftly as possible, and I can also assure him that this has been something that I have focused on significantly since I arrived in this post as well, and we will continue to do all that we can in these areas to support Ukraine.
Tulip Sadiq.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent in Hampstead and Highgate is a refugee from Ukraine whose home and livelihood was destroyed in Ukraine. She contacted me because of the uncertainty of her visa situation. Her 3-year visa will expire in December, but she can't apply for extension until November, which is stopping her from getting a new job and also stopping her from securing a new tenancy agreement. She's at risk of becoming homeless in the coming weeks. I recognise that my honourable friend is now the Foreign Secretary, but she knows the Home Office well, and I want to know what conversations she's had with colleagues from the Home Office about reviewing the Ukrainian visa scheme so that Ukrainians can actually rebuild their lives in this country.
Can I welcome my honourable friend's support for refugees, for those who have come on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, also from other Ukrainian schemes here. As she will know, that the government has extended the visas, has set out provision for the extension of the visas, and I think the point that she is referring to is to do with the timing of the mechanism of the Home Office mechanism about the timings of when applications can go in, and I will raise that issue with the Home Secretary.
Select Committee Member Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary mentioned that the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament, the Rada, was here today and was in the gallery. And he also met this morning with members of the Ukraine All-Party Group. Speaker Stefanchuk made the parallel between Western sanctions packages and versions of the Apple iPhone. It feels like we see a new one every other week. Rather than the gradual introduction of sanctions on Russia, will the Foreign Secretary work with the United States administration and other allies to introduce a sanctions package that will really hurt Russian oligarchs in the pocket?
Foreign Secretary.
So I want to see the strongest possible economic pressure on Russia from every avenue, frankly, and it is an issue that we have discussed extensively with the US. It's an issue that we have discussed extensively with Europe. It is an issue that I discuss with my foreign minister colleagues, but also that the Chancellor discusses with her finance minister colleagues as well. We want to see the strongest package. I think we are, however, I do think it is right to continue to introduce new sanctions as soon as we have the evidence ready. I don't think we should wait until more work can be done or more agreement can be reached. If we have the evidence to be able to introduce another set of sanctions, frankly, I think we should get on with it, because we need to maximise the economic pressure as rapidly as we possibly can to put pressure on Putin's war machine.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Foreign Secretary agree that more must be done to inform not just the British public, but also countries which are equivocal in their support for Ukraine, that Russia's illegal invasion is particularly egregious in its cynical and cruel targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure? I pay tribute to a member of Rugby's Ukrainian committee who told me today, Russia strikes not only the front line, but homes, hospitals and power plants. Whole regions are left in darkness after systematic attacks. Just recently, a maternity hospital in Sumy was targeted, and yet people wake up after night of bombardment, go to work, children go to school. The unimaginable has become normal. That's the true horror. Does she agree that these horrors can only strengthen our resolve in supporting Ukraine?
We must maintain the strongest of resolves in supporting Ukraine. I talked to families, to children who have to sleep in the corridor or in underground car parks at night to avoid drone attacks, but still get up for school, get up and carry on with their lives each day. The Ukrainian people are showing that resilience. We will continue to support them.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The only thing wrong with the Secretary of State's admirable statement is the fact that it was made by a British Foreign Secretary rather than the President of the United States. Given that only a few months ago, President Trump was saying that President Zelensky had few, if any, cards to play, whereas she takes a much more optimistic view of the geopolitical situation as it regards the invasion of Ukraine. Has she identified any signs that the leader of the free world is coming to a more realistic view of the nature of the killer in the Kremlin?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, this is an issue that we have discussed considerably with the US, and I welcome the President Trump's decision, for example, to enable NATO allies to purchase the vital US military equipment for Ukraine's defence, including Patriots, for example. And I think what we saw is the President Trump called for a peace process around Ukraine. And President Zelensky was ready to have those peace discussions, but President Putin has done the opposite. And I think there is a growing sense of frustration that everybody can see that President Putin has just ignored those requests for peace discussions and instead is actually seeking to do the opposite, not just in Ukraine itself, but also those attempts to destabilise NATO airspace as well.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The NATO PA delegation, of which the Deputy Leader, the member for Wetherby and Easingwold, sat on the opposition front bench, met with the Ukrainian delegation over the weekend and also heard of President Zelensky. Can I say it was a sort of the same line we heard from him time and time again, is the need for more weapons, equipment and munitions. And particularly, as we know, in terms of deep fire missiles, drones, munitions. So can I say this to the Foreign Secretary and welcome her statement, is that a lot has been said today about the need to unfreeze Russian assets and to use the full value. And she's made comments about work is being done. There are numerous occasions in this House when we've seen things happen quickly. I think things need to move at pace to ensure that the industrial capacity that they still have free in Ukraine that can make these things is used by funding it as quickly as possible.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome my honourable friend's point, because we do want to see progress made as rapidly as possible. He will know that the UK has stepped up support for Ukraine this year, the military support that we directly provide, including providing £4.5 billion of military support, which is more than ever before, including thousands of air defence missiles and drones. We want to go further with the Russian sovereign assets process.
Can I remind colleagues that we have another statement of business later on, and questions do not require a preamble. They should be sharp and to the point. Stephen Gethin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate the Foreign Secretary on her appointment and welcome her remarks that the consensus that we have around the war in Ukraine has held across, well, the vast majority of this chamber. Can I ask her, she's got a fresh set of eyes, Can she look at the efficiency of some of the aid that we're going to? Can we work more closely with organisations like the Come Back Alive Foundation, or can more work be done in Ukraine? I think the UK is doing a good job on this, but a fresh set of eyes is always welcome. Thank you.
Well, we always want to ensure that whether the aid we provide, the defence support we provide, that all of that is done in the most effective way, but crucially in partnership with Ukraine, because Ukraine themselves, who know where their greatest need lies, as a sovereign nation, that is what we support.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the measures that have been announced today, particularly on oil and gas revenues. This comes as Russia continues to target Ukrainian energy infrastructure, including a Ukrainian state-run power plant last night. So how is the government supporting Ukrainian homes to keep warm over winter? And will she join me in paying tribute to the Huddersfield Ukrainian Club, who continue to support Ukrainians who have arrived in Huddersfield since the conflict?
Yeah. Can I welcome the support she's providing in her constituency, and that her community is supporting as well. We've seen that happen right across the country. She's right to focus on the impact on families, because Russia is deliberately trying to target the heating, the lighting for families across Ukraine as they go into winter by targeting their infrastructure. We have just announced, and I announced that in Kyiv, a £42 million energy support package, which is exactly to provide support to keep homes warm, to support the resilience of the Ukrainian people through the winter.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, given that time is the most precious commodity in war, and as Eliza Manningham-Buller, the former head of MI5, said, Britain may already be at war with Russia, why have we allowed Russia so much time? For example, to build up a stock of 155 shells, 3 times the quantity of the entire European and American stock of 155 shells. How long has Ukraine now got to hold out against Russia, who has mobilized their entire economy onto a war footing to win this war at almost any cost to themselves? Don't we have to up our long-range weapons support and our other military support to help Ukraine finish this war and win this war?
Foreign Secretary.
So, as I just set out, the UK has stepped up support for Ukraine this year, providing the £4.5 billion of military support. We will need to continue to provide military support to Ukraine, but we also need to encourage as many other allies to do so as well. And it was striking for me in Kyiv, meeting the Prime Minister and President, how much they saw the UK as a leading ally, but also recognised the need for this international partnership and support. We need to continue to escalate the support. That's why we also need this pressure on the economic side as well as on the defence side, because it's only by that combined concerted effort will we be able to affect the course of this war.
Luke Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a privilege today to meet with the Chair of the Rada of Ukraine and add my voice to the shared commitment across this House to stand with Ukraine and in defence of our democratic values. In order to increase economic pressure on Russia, we must look to sanction Russian-linked companies operating in third countries, including in the energy sector. So can the Foreign Secretary assure the House that she will apply maximum pressure on such companies, even when based outside Russia itself?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend, and I can tell him that we have increasingly now, as part of the sanctions packages, both in September and this month's sanction packages, are now increasingly looking at entities in third countries which are continuing to heavily support the transit, the exports of Russian oil and gas in order to make sure that those sanctions can really bite.
Helen Maguire.
Deputy Speaker, I just returned from Ukraine, where I learnt firsthand about the challenges that both the military and the emergency services are facing in dealing with unexploded ordnance and their impact when visiting the heroic patients at Superhumans, the prosthetic super centre in Lviv. In Ukraine, there are over 60,000 amputees from the war. The need is immense. So will the Minister consider further strengthening the Strategic Health Alliance for UK-Ukraine trauma recovery with additional funding over and above the £1.2 million already pledged?
Well, we will continue to look alongside all of our allies at the different forms and the different ways in which our support can be provided. That's why we particularly had highlighted the energy infrastructure and the support for homes. But she is right to highlight the resilience and determination of the Ukrainian emergency services, those who have to respond every morning to see where strikes have taken place, who have to respond in the middle of the night when the drones arrive, and we should all pay tribute to their bravery and strength.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think all of us who have visited Ukraine will know the stoicism of the people. And despite being bombarded night after night, they continue to rebuild, often supported by UK businesses and individuals and others around the European Union. But does she agree with me that we must do more to continue to encourage businesses and individuals to support Ukraine in any way they possibly can, but ultimately it's Putin's responsibility to pay for the damage he is causing to the country, and his responsibility only?
I agree. We do expect Putin to pay and the Russian to pay for the damage that they are doing by this invasion, this unprovoked aggression in Ukraine. We will continue to support Ukraine and encourage everybody else to do so, but ultimately we need Russia to pay for the damage they've done.
Lisa Smart.
Speaker, I welcome many of the measures that the Foreign Secretary has outlined today. Like her, I visited Ukraine and seen the impact of the attacks from Putin and his flunkies, and like her, I've seen the resilience from the Ukrainian people. I also believe, as we all do in this chamber today, that Putin and his flunkies must pay for their crimes. Could the Foreign Secretary confirm if the UK government would support pursuing legally through International Criminal Court those individuals responsible for their crimes?
Good idea.
Well, as you know, we continue to support international law and international court processes as well. But she's also right to say that Russia ultimately needs to pay the price and to be held account for the damage they are doing. And I hope she would also agree what an incredibly beautiful city Kyiv is, and how much so many people are going about their daily lives in exactly the same way, undeterred and determined, in fact, not to let Russia win.
Deputy Speaker, the politicians, civilians, soldiers that I spoke to last month in Kiev were unambiguous when asked what is the best thing the UK could do to help them win the war. The hundreds of billions of frozen Russian assets that they currently can't deploy can help them bolster their military and swing the war decisively in their favour. So on their behalf, can I ask the Foreign Secretary to use every power available to her to unlock these assets and put them in the service of the people of Ukraine?
Can I welcome his support for unlocking the Russian sovereign assets? It is something that the Chancellor is raising in Washington with international partners, probably pretty much as we speak.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy, thank you very much. Can I welcome the Secretary of State to her place? I know the experience that you bring from the other ministership will benefit all, not just her, but all of us in this House, and thank you for all of her answers. With Putin having watched carefully to the Israeli-Gaza problem, he will know that all eyes are turning to Russia to end that unnecessary conflict. So what further steps in cooperation with our American allies can be taken to seize this opportunity to end bloodshed, restore education and hope for Ukrainian children, and thereby ensure that Putin realises he has no other option other than the cessation of Russian aggression? Thank you so much.
Can I thank the honourable member for his kind words, and that I agree with him that ultimately there must be no other option for Putin than to cease this aggression, and this is ultimately about hope for Ukrainian children.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I strongly welcome the sanctions targeting the $108 billion in oil revenue that the Kremlin still received last year, and also the progress on the $350 billion in frozen Russian sovereign assets, and applaud the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor for their efforts in building a coalition with the EU and others to move from using the interest payments to the capital. And does she agree with me that this recent breakthrough shows that legally this money should be treated as a down payment on the reparations for the horrific harm that Russia has caused, but we know they will do everything to avoid paying?
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point, and this reflects the work that the EU has set out about linking the issues around assets to reparation payments as well. We welcome that work, and we believe that there is a strong basis to go forward. We need to do so in a coordinated way, but we just need to recognise the importance of supporting Ukraine.
Chris Coughlin.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the government's progress on the frozen Russian assets. However, it is disappointing that they, as of yet, are only allocated to recovery and not military capability, because Russia is spending $40 billion more on the war in Ukraine than Ukraine and her Western allies. While the courage of Ukrainian forces have fought Russia to a standstill, does the Foreign Secretary agree that if those frozen assets were used today to close and exceed that military spending gap, then Ukraine would have a path not just to stop Russia, but to win?
Well, what I would say is we're already increasing the military support from the UK. We do want to see that happen across the board as well. But I think the way to put the greatest pressure on Russia is always going to be through a mix of different measures. It's going to be through that direct defence support. It's also going to be through support for the resilience of the Ukrainian people, for example, just their basic energy infrastructure, making sure that they can keep going and keep their communities going, and also establishing the strong economic pressure on Russia so that they are put in a position where they have to change force. We're going to need all of those things to happen at once in order to be able to have a significant impact on the way that Putin is behaving.
Turner.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement today and the decision that she made as Home Secretary recently in respect of the Ukraine Permission Extension scheme. Does she agree that when Putin probes to weakness, we must respond by demonstrating strength? And does she further agree that the post-war development of Ukraine's own significant energy resources, which may require British technical expertise, would serve the dual purpose of helping to reconstruct Ukraine's own shattered economy and increasing Europe's own security of energy supply?
I agree with my honourable friend that Ukraine's security is Europe's security in so many different ways, in defence terms, but also in energy fields as well. And that is why it is so important that we should continue to support Ukraine, and also to continue to support Ukrainians who are here in the UK, who came at the beginning of the war to find safety.
Danny Chambers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this year I joined a brilliant organisation called Mighty Convoy, where we drove some refurbished ambulances to Ukraine full of medical supplies. And while we were there, we happened to bump into another organisation called Fire Aid, who are taking refurbished fire engines to Ukraine from the UK. Not only is this equipment vital for the war effort, but the Ukrainians we met said it is such a morale boost to know not only the British government are behind their war efforts, but also the British public are too. Would the Foreign Secretary join me in thanking all the volunteers from the UK who drive equipment to Ukraine to help with that war effort?
Yeah. The honourable member makes a really important point about the strength of support there is across the country from communities, civil society. That is really important for Ukraine, for Ukrainians to hear at a time when they are showing such resilience and strength, to know that people across the UK have huge respect for what they're doing and will continue to support it. And I do welcome the work of different organisations to raise funds and to be able to provide support for Ukraine.
Final question, Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Foreign Secretary for, in her previous role, extending the Homes for Ukraine scheme by 2 years, and welcome her to her new role. This morning, the chair of the RADA, speaking to the parliamentary group, also talked of how Russian manufacturers are now using advanced electronics from white goods to build their drones. What will the Foreign Secretary do to prevent such vital equipment going to them through the export of seemingly harmless white goods?
The honourable member is right to raise issues about broader technology, and it's why we need to ensure that our sanctions regime is continually updating and continually responding as well. I think what we've also seen, though, is immense improvements in Ukrainian technology on different responses, particularly around drone technology and countering drone technology as well. So I think we need to recognise the expertise and the strength of the Ukrainian people, of the country of Ukraine, and continue to show our support at every level.
That concludes the statement on Ukraine. I'll allow the front benches a few moments to shuffle over as we prepare for the second statement.